I know there are a lot of people out there that believe they attract narcissists or narcissistic types. They just feel like they're a magnet for them. I've known a lot of guys that seem to have this, especially like two or three in particular. They just have this crazy way. It seems like they just draw borderline women to them like a magnet. um, I have a little bit of a funny story about that, but I'm going to skip it for now. I'm going to get into the meat and potatoes of this video. But first, check out the item description below to check out my high conflict community. If you're co-parenting, attempting to co-parent, or you're in a custody battle with a high conflict individual, you're going to want to join my Patreon page. You're going to the high conflict community on Patreon I've created this community for some of the most exclusive content and some of the most effective skills, tools, and approaches for attempting to deal with or work with these situations. If you like my content, you want to help me out, hit the tip jar. If you want to ask a viewer question, the email is also in the description below. You can check out my other channel too on spirituality and personal empowerment. All in the description below. So if you feel like you are the type that attracts or just draws narcissistic types to you, there really is something to it. And what that something is a little bit unclear. It's not really a science. If you're new to my channel, I want to mention that I feel like I do a deep dive into a lot of things that just frankly a lot of other mental health professionals aren't necessarily doing a deep dive into. But let's get into this, okay? I'm actually gonna try a different format here. Woo! Gonna take some notes, so you have some notes, okay? Now, first thing that I want you to consider, that if you are the type of person that seems to attract narcissists, do you have a narcissistic parent? Okay? Now, or a narcissistic type, or borderline. They've often been described as bipolar. My mom or dad is bipolar. I've said this in many other videos. Bipolar disorder is often very misdiagnosed. It is, I'll hear, they're crazy. I think they might be bipolar. Usually to me, often means that there is a personality disorder. Now, here's why this is significant. Now, when you're a kid, like, you come out of the womb and, like, you're almost like a tape recorder. Okay, for you younger kids, a tape recorder is this thing that we used to have, and we'd listen to music on them. Actually, I have one behind me. I have an old Walkman behind me. I can't see it, but, a little bit of nostalgia, right? Anyways, your mind starts recording when you're born. You get all these beliefs put into your head. You also get this system of kind of what's considered normal into your head. Also, usually children who have narcissistic type parents or like a borderline parent, the only validation that they often get is when they fall into like a caretaking type role. Like they will take care of a narcissistic parent, take care of a borderline parent. That's usually the only time that they got validation, and so their identity becomes a little bit of a caretaker. They usually grow up believing that, they end up believing that they failed their parent. And the inner child believes that the parent, that they failed to be a good child. And the inner child fails to see that the parent is sick, and instead blames the self for not getting validation. And so it still seems to seek that validation, like subconsciously it seems to seek that validation. And well, when they find a narcissistic partner, I believe there's a lot of different things going on here. But one is to try and resolve, like, hey, here's another chance to show that I'm worthy, or show this, right? And it's irrational. Okay? How do you deal with that? Well, you got to reprogram your subconscious a little bit. You got to address a lot of these subconscious beliefs. It's kind of a difficult or painful process. There's usually some trauma there. But if you have a narcissistic type parent and you still tiptoe around them, then you're going to have that tiptoeiness. You're going to have that trait. Okay? And narcissistic types just kind of pick up on that. Okay? The next point I was going to make is, are you overly apologetic? Okay. Now, I've often referred to, right, if you have a high conflict parent, the other parent, I've often referred to them as the apologetic parent, because man, it's like, even if I have them as a client, they just apologize like crazy. It's sorry this, sorry that, sorry, 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 sorry. And I always have to be like, you've really got to stop apologizing. And it's not just about the behavior. There's a programming there. Okay, there's like this deep rooted programming that has to do with why that person feels like they need to apologize. Usually it's because, again, if you have a narcissistic parent, I'm going to use my cursor over here, and you grow up basically getting it branded into you or seared into your brain that everything was your fault and nothing was their fault, and then you carry that into adulthood and you're always taking accountability for stuff that you're not accountable for and apologizing, take 100% of the blame, you're going to draw a narcissistic type to you. That they will gravitate towards that. Okay, someone that they can blame for everything. You've got it. Okay. The next point that I was going to make is, do you project or put off fear vibes? Okay. Now here's the thing: is fear is Gatorade for narcissistic types. This is what they pick up on this. It's, to me, if you're putting off a lot of fear in the world, if you're putting off a lot of fear vibes and this sense of worriedness and this sense of all of this big giant lack of security, because that's really what it's all connected, right? And insecurity. The more you put off vibes of fear and insecurity, the more you're just going to draw and attract narcissistic types to you. They're drawn to this. Like, they say that, right, if you go in the ocean and you pour blood in the water, then, you have a certain radius and here come the sharks. To me, that's precisely what it is, happens with narcissistic types, especially narcissists, but potentially also borderline, is that they just pick up on this like a shark picks up on water or picks up on blood in the water. This is what, this is what tips them off. They pick up on it, I swear, like that. And because narcissistic and borderline types they're just highly emotional, they don't use logic, they don't use a functioning thinking brain or a logical, critical thinking brain. What you end up with is that they just go off emotions and feelings. Intuitively, they just pick up on fear. They just do, and they hone in on it. And ways that you may project that fear or insecurity is, kind of that small, putting off that weak smallness, that please don't hurt me-ness, and I get that as a child that might have been somewhat effective to avoid getting harmed, but as an adult, you're just going to attract, if you appear weak, I'm going to put that as my next note. Do you appear weak? Okay, if you appear weak, then there are certain people that will see you as an easy target. I mean, and I've worked with people where, this just closed body language and the tiny voice, and the always looking down, and man, I'm telling you that they pick up on it. You're gonna draw them to you if you do this. Okay, so what do you do instead? Okay, now just for sort of the lack of, because I don't want this video to be too terribly long, what do you do instead? Okay, you have to change yourself. You have to become a different person. Okay, become a different person. Now, people who are traumatized, they really struggle with investing in themselves. I talk all the time about self-care. You must put a lot of these old beliefs and scripts behind you. My recommendation is for people to do a deep dive. Why do they believe this? Why and how did you develop the belief system? that you have. Okay? Usually is the narcissistic parent. Usually goes back to there. This is why we wanted to look at this first. Okay? Why and how did you develop that belief system that you have? Okay? Where did it come from? You have to examine it. I know that's cut off now. Let's see if I can scroll down. There we go. You have to change, you have to change who you are. You have to change what you do. Become a different person. Cultivate strength and confidence. I actually have a good friend who, based on all reports, I've known this guy for like a decade. And he just recently opened up to me about how abusive his childhood was. I'm convinced that his dad was a narcissist. And he was confiding in me because he attracts these people in his life and at work, in his personal life. And he's like, what is going on? And generally speaking, I just try to be a friend, but I was at a place too, because I really care about this friend. He's been a really good friend to me for a solid decade. And I'm like, bro, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're putting off these vibes. And a lot of it is this, where he just tries to remain aloof. He tries to remain as invisible as possible. Okay? I'm going to put that on there as well. Do you try to remain invisible? Narcissists, man, I swear, they look for the one cowering in the corner, so to speak. The soft-spoken, the one that the one that seems least likely to stand up for themselves, okay? So confront your belief system. Painful process. Super important. What's more painful is continuing to get these people coming through your lives and trampling all over you, right? Okay? So that is a quick rundown of why you might attract narcissists and what to do about it. If you like this content, once again, hit the tip jar and go hit my Patreon page, because there will be a lot more type of stuff like this. Okay? Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.